For centuries, the very mention of the name El Dorado has stirred the human imagination. It is a legend born in the midst of South American jungles, whispered through generations of explorers, chroniclers, and dreamers. The promise of a golden kingdom, where streets glittered with gold and kings bathed in sacred lakes of light, lured countless men to their deaths. Yet behind the shimmering mirage lies a real story, a story of empire, conquest, and the unrelenting human hunger for wealth and glory. This is the true history of El Dorado, the legend of gold, greed, and mystery. Long before the arrival of Europeans in the Americas, the native peoples of the Andes and the northern highlands of South America had forged rich civilizations built on faith, ritual, and craftsmanship. Among these, the Muisca people, part of the great Chibcha-speaking cultures, flourished in what is now central Colombia. They lived in fertile valleys surrounded by the Andes, cultivating maize, trading salt, and crafting beautiful ornaments of gold. To the Muisca, gold was not wealth in the European sense. It was sacred, the physical embodiment of the sun's energy, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. At the heart of Muisca's spiritual life was a ritual that would become the seed of one of history's greatest myths. When a new ruler was crowned, he was taken to Lake Guatavita, a small but sacred crater lake nestled in the mountains northeast of modern Bogotá. There, before his people and the priests, he would strip naked and cover his entire body with fine gold dust until he gleamed like the sun itself. Standing on a ceremonial raft adorned with flowers, feathers, and precious offerings, he would sail to the lake center. As music and chants filled the air, he would cast treasures of gold and emeralds into the waters, gifts to the gods of creation. Then he would dive into the lake, washing away the golden dust, symbolically returning the metal to the earth. This sacred act was not one of greed but of devotion, a promise of harmony between the ruler, his people, and the divine. But when the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 16th century, they saw something very different. To them, gold was not a spiritual symbol but a source of power. It was the metal that built empires, financed wars, and crowned kings. When tales reached their ears of a golden king performing a ritual at a lake filled with treasure, the story took on new life. The Spaniards called him El Hombre Dorado, the Gilded Man. Over time, that man became a city, and that city became a kingdom. Eventually, El Dorado was no longer just a ruler, it was an entire empire made of gold, hidden somewhere in the uncharted interior of the continent. In 1536, one of the first to chase this legend was Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada, a Spanish lawyer turned conquistador. Leading an expedition from the Caribbean coast, Quesada and his men marched through swamps, jungles, and mountains in search of the rumored golden land. Their journey was brutal. Hunger, disease, and exhaustion claimed hundreds of lives. But in 1537, they stumbled upon the highlands of the Muisca and their capital Bogotá, the city that would later become Bogotá. There they found gold ornaments, emeralds, and intricate artifacts, enough to convince them they had reached the outskirts of El Dorado. Yet the Golden Kingdom itself eluded them. The sacred lakes yielded treasures but no city of gold. Still, Quesada returned to Spain with riches and stories that only deepened the legend's allure. Meanwhile, other conquistadors joined the feverish hunt. From the south came Sebastián de Benalcázar, marching northward from Quito. From the east came the German adventurer Nicolás Federmann, leading another expedition across the Venezuelan plains. Fate brought all three, Quesada, Benalcázar, and Federmann, to the same place in 1539. Each believed himself the discoverer of El Dorado. Their meeting, filled with rivalry and tension, ended not in conquest but in bitter disappointment. The Golden City had once again slipped through their grasp. Yet the legend refused to die. With each failure, it merely moved further into the unknown. Some said El Dorado lay beyond the Andes, hidden in the dense jungles of the Amazon basin. Others claimed it was far to the east, near the great rivers of Guiana. The more they searched, the further the mirage retreated, a moving target forever just out of reach. By the mid-16th century, El Dorado had become an obsession that stretched across continents. New expeditions set out, financed by nobles and kings who dreamed of wealth beyond measure. One of the most daring explorers was Francisco de Orellana. In 1541, Orellana set out from Peru with Gonzalo Pizarro, brother of the infamous conqueror of the Incas. Their goal was to find the land of cinnamon, and perhaps the golden empire rumored beyond the mountains. Starvation and mutiny plagued their journey, and eventually Orellana broke away, drifting down an immense river, the Amazon. His voyage, the first ascent of that great river by Europeans, ended at the Atlantic Ocean. Orellana spoke of massive civilizations along its banks, of wealthy cities and powerful queens. Though much of it was exaggerated, his reports fueled the myth that El Dorado lay somewhere along the Amazon's hidden tributaries. Back in Europe, maps began to mark mysterious lakes and cities, Manoa, Parima, and El Dorado, scattered across the blank spaces of South America. The legend had evolved again, no longer a single place, but an entire region of untold riches. Explorers, adventurers, and fortune seekers continued to vanish into the jungle in pursuit of the Golden Phantom. In the late 16th century, the legend reached England, where it captured the imagination of one of history's most ambitious men, Sir Walter Raleigh. A soldier, courtier, and favourite of Queen Elizabeth I, Raleigh dreamed of building an English empire in the New World to rival Spain's. In 1595, he set sail for South America with ships, men, and hopes of discovering El Dorado. Landing at the mouth of the Orinoco River in present-day Venezuela, Raleigh explored deep into its labyrinthine channels, convinced that somewhere beyond the mountains lay a golden city called Manoa, ruled by a mighty king. Though he never found it, Raleigh returned to England proclaiming that El Dorado was real and that he had glimpsed its borders. His published account, the discovery of the large, rich, and beautiful empire of Guiana, captivated Europe. He described temples roofed with gold, rulers draped in jewels, and a civilization more splendid than any in Europe. Raleigh's tale, though largely fiction, reignited the legend for another century. He would return to Guiana 20 years later, old and desperate to redeem his fortunes. His second expedition in 1617 ended in tragedy. His son was killed in battle, and his men rebelled. Raleigh returned to England broken, and King James I, under pressure from Spain, ordered his execution. With his death, one might have expected the dream of El Dorado to fade. But it did not. It persisted, because El Dorado had become more than a quest for gold. It had become a metaphor for the unattainable. Over the next 2 centuries, adventurers from France, Portugal, and the Netherlands launched expeditions deep into South America's unexplored interiors. Some claim to have seen traces of lost civilizations, mysterious earthworks, and golden ornaments among remote tribes. In 1775, the Spanish crown even commissioned a scientific expedition under José Solano y Boat to explore the Orinoco Basin and the fabled Lake Parima. They found no golden city, only endless jungle and rivers. But on maps of the time, Lake Parima remained, a vast inland sea thought to hide the capital of El Dorado. It would appear on maps until the mid-19th century, long after it was proven to be a myth. The truth, however, had always been closer to the surface, and far more human. Archaeologists and historians later discovered that the origin of the legend lay entirely within the Muisca ritual at Lake Guatavita. The golden raft, now one of Colombia's national treasures, was found in a cave in 1969. This exquisite artifact depicts a ruler standing on a raft surrounded by priests, holding offerings of gold, a perfect miniature of the ceremony that had so enchanted early Spanish chroniclers. To the Muisca, this ritual was a sacred act of giving, not a display of material wealth. But to the Europeans, steeped in a world where gold meant imperial power, it was the promise of endless riches. The lake itself became the focus of centuries of exploitation. In 1545, Spanish settlers attempted to drain Lake Guatavita by cutting a trench into its rim. The waters receded, revealing mud laced with gold ornaments and jewels. But the work was perilous, and many drowned in the unstable ground. Later, in the 19th and 20th centuries, British and Colombian companies used steam pumps and modern equipment to lower the water level again. They retrieved golden artifacts, but never the unimaginable hoard they hoped for. The total amount of gold recovered was modest, far less than the fortune that had driven thousands to ruin. The legend of El Dorado had been built on a misunderstanding, a ritual transformed into a myth of endless wealth. And yet, the story of El Dorado has endured. Even as empires rose and fell, as maps grew accurate and science replaced superstition, the allure of the Golden Kingdom continued to shimmer in the human imagination. For modern historians and archaeologists, the legend offers a window into the meeting of two worlds, the spiritual wealth of indigenous cultures and the material greed of the conquerors who misunderstood them. In the jungles of the Amazon, new discoveries in recent years have given the legend an unexpected twist. Using satellite imagery and LiDAR technology, researchers have uncovered evidence of vast ancient settlements hidden beneath the canopy, complex networks of roads, canals, and earthworks stretching for miles. These findings suggest that before the arrival of Europeans, the Amazon basin was home to advanced, interconnected societies. Could these forgotten civilizations, with their wealth of natural resources and sophisticated cultures, have contributed to the legends that inspired El Dorado? Some archaeologists think it is possible that fragments of truth were woven into the fabric of myth, preserved in stories passed from one generation to the next. Still, El Dorado remains a mirror of the human spirit, a reflection of our boundless curiosity, our insatiable desire for more, and our tendency to transform faith into fantasy. To the Spanish conquistadors, it was a promise of gold. To the indigenous peoples, it was a sacred bond with the divine. To us today, it stands as a cautionary tale of ambition unrestrained and dreams misunderstood. In the centuries following the conquest, the idea of El Dorado found new life in art and literature. Writers like Voltaire and Edgar Allan Poe reimagined it not as a physical place but as a symbol of humanity's eternal search for perfection. In Poe's poem El Dorado, a weary knight journeys through life seeking the golden land, only to find it beyond the grave, a metaphor for unreachable ideals. In Voltaire's Candide, El Dorado is portrayed as a utopian land of wisdom and peace, where gold has no value and men live free from greed. These portrayals capture the enduring paradox of the legend, that paradise exists only when the desire for gold is abandoned. Today, Lake Guatavita remains quiet and untouched, its emerald waters reflecting the Andes under the Colombian sky. Pilgrims, tourists, and scholars visit its shores to glimpse the birthplace of a legend. The golden raft rests in Bogota's Gold Museum, a silent witness to the myth that changed history. For the people of Colombia and South America, El Dorado has come full circle, from a sacred ritual to a European obsession to a symbol of cultural pride and endurance. And yet, the legend continues to evolve. Some see El Dorado not as a lost city, but as an idea that transcends geography, the eternal human yearning for something greater, for hidden beauty and undiscovered worlds. Perhaps the real El Dorado is not found in jungles or lakes, but in our own pursuit of meaning, knowledge, and connection. It is a legend that teaches as much about those who sought it as about the land that inspired it. In the end, El Dorado was never a lie. It was a truth seen through different eyes, the Muisca's truth of faith and offering, transformed by the conquistadors' vision of conquest and gold. Between those two worlds, a myth was born that would shape the destiny of a continent. The story of El Dorado stands as one of the great parables of history, a reminder of how myths can move nations, how dreams can drive men to unimaginable lengths, and how the pursuit of wealth can reveal the deepest truths about the human soul. From the mist of Lake Guatavita to the farthest reaches of the Amazon, from the conquistadors' maps to the pages of literature, El Dorado remains both everywhere and nowhere, a golden shadow that refuses to fade. Even now, centuries later, the question still lingers. Was there ever a golden city hidden in the jungles of South America? The answer, perhaps, depends on what one is searching for. For some, El Dorado will always be a lost kingdom buried under vines and soil. For others, it is a metaphor for the human condition, the endless quest for glory, for paradise, for the unattainable light that glimmers just beyond the horizon.